Ladies and gentlemen, today is June 21st, 2018, and this is the King Kale Show, episode 371, where we learn to be better artists. My name is Kienan Lafferty, and I'd like to welcome you to another show. Today, we're going to be going on a bit of a tour. We're going to be touring the latest PSD from the Made of Metal series, Mika and Mocha, the two awesome maid girls from the anime that never existed. We're going to be going on a real-time tour. We're going to be dissecting this layer by layer to take us all the way back to not only line art, but way back all the way to even the sketch and how this all started and how you can get similar results with your PSDs and your art pieces. And if you would like to follow along on your own computer and download this PSD, highly recommend you go download it on Patreon. The link will be up here as well as down in the description. All right, with all that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that you'll notice here is you can see that we have our lovely sketch, our lovely, just so full of life, and it's a great idea, but it needs to be refined. So the first thing that I want to tell you guys about is how do you get a good idea? And my greatest advice that I could ever give to any artist is that you want to try to never get stuck on only one. This was just one of many thumbnails that I created probably over a year ago, but it's actually stuck in my head with me ever since. But I always like to start out all of my ideas in things called thumbnails. I'm sure you've heard that before. Drawing on small squares, drawing on a small piece of the canvas, and trying to just get flow, get composition, looking for interesting lines. You can see here, you want to be looking for interesting compositions as well as flow. I say that word a lot, but I never explain myself. So today I'm going to explain what flow is. So flow is action lines. Look for action lines. See how the curve of like Mika's body goes this way and Mocha's goes that way? There's even a subtle curve that happens here. See how both of their bodies are kind of leaning inwards? They're not just straight up and down. It feels straight up and down at first, but if you draw a straight line through them, see how it's not exact, like the flow lines are not exactly straight up and down. So subtleties matter, and subtleties can be caught in the early thumbnailing stages, okay? So that is the best way for you guys to get ideas. Never ever try to start drawing on the entire canvas. I made that mistake many years ago. Don't let yourself end up like me, okay? So anyway, so we start with a sketch, and then eventually we're gonna get to clean line art. Clean line art is about here. Now you might look at this and be like, wow, Kienan, that's such nice clean line art, but when you zoom in, you can see that actually it's not quite as clean as you might think it was. And this is a personal preference on my style. I like to, whereas other people might do this type of thing, where, here, let me make a new layer here. And nothing against this style, I just personally don't have the patience for it, where you lower down the opacity, and once again, through the power of Photoshop, you have to go in there and then begin drawing your final set of lines. And this can be a real pain in the neck if you don't have a smoothing program. Luckily, if you direct your attention to the top taskbar here, Photoshop has introduced a new smoothing feature. Hey, that's great. Now we don't all have to spend $30 on Lazy Nezumi. But the problem is that it still doesn't work exactly as good as Lazy Nezumi. I mean, so I'd say use this at your own risk. It's definitely a good thing to get the idea of what a smoothing tool does. And if you like that, and then you decide that you actually want to spend a good amount of money and get a good smoothing tool, then invest in Lazy Nezumi. I'm not sponsored by them. I absolutely love them. But anyway, and I'll have a link to them down below as well. So yeah, so that is another style that many people like to do. I personally want to explore more of it, but for the purposes of today's exercise and today's PSD, I want to show you how I don't do that, and actually how I can kind of sidestep that. I can sidestep the need to do that. And the way that I do it is, you can probably see for yourself, I'm not worrying about refining anything on the inside. Anything that's on the inside of these lines, let's go ahead and make a new layer here. And you can see here, like, look at the hilt of this sword here. And I'll just make that a little bit brighter. And make it green, why not? Cool. So you can see that everything on the outside, all of these outside lines, dang it, now it needs to be darker. I'm so picky with this stuff. There we go. All of the outside lines, the silhouette is clean, and everything on the inside, see, now you got all these little artifacts and chicken scratches and all this crap, okay? And that is personally the way that I like to work on these. That's my personal style, and it helps a lot when you start moving into masking. And that is going to be the next thing that we do. So yeah, just all in all, whenever you're starting to refine your line art, just watch the outer silhouettes. Just keep the outer shape clean, because that's going to help you out a lot with masking. And that's what we're going to get into next. Okay? So let's go ahead and move on to that. Let's go ahead and take this characters layer. Let's move on down to the characters layers. And you'll see that there's all these overpaint layers. Overpaints are things that I do at the very end. I like to think of all of my PSDs as sandwiches. I start with the line art, which sits in the center. And then I add the line art is actually the meat of the sandwich. And then one slice of bread is actually going to be the underpainting, right? The stuff that's going to go behind it. And then we go into overpaints, which is what these layers are here. The overpaints are the other slice of bread, okay? That's enough of that analogy. So you can go ahead and peel away the breadcrumbs, and you can see that eventually Mika's head shape changes, and that's another thing that I do. Sometimes I'll actually just duplicate, or I'll flatten an entire layer, and I'll just like I'll liquefy things, I'll squish them together, and you guys shouldn't be afraid or ashamed to do that. I used to think that there was a big stigma behind using the liquefy tool, that I should be able to get everything correct the first time. And honestly, like if you can, that's really awesome. But you have this tool called Photoshop here that allows you to make as many mistakes as possible and morph anything around and photo bash anything you could possibly ever dream of. And you should be using every single advantage that you have. That's my new stance on it, and it ain't changing anytime soon. So, overpaint 1. Okay, so then we're finally to Mika lines and Mocha lines. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of these, and let's go ahead and begin adding in masks one by one. Or rather, take us back to right here, where you can see that now we just have our line art. Now, there's something interesting about the line art. Did you notice it? Well, yeah, how come Mika's, like, the head of Mika has, like, pink lines and red lines? Well, how does that come into play? Why would you do that? And the reason that I do that is because it really helps to soften the lines at the end. It adds life back into your lines. And I will show you the difference between that as we get to that point again. I'm actually going to duplicate these, and let's set these to black lines. So I'm going to go ahead and just paint these lines black, and then we'll build these characters back up from the bottom with black lines. And then I want to show you the difference that it makes. Okay, so we have, oh great, here's our nice clean line art, but wait, what's that blue shape behind the characters? Why would I put that there? And the reason that I do that is it's just kind of an artsy thing that you do. You put a shape behind the character and it immediately adds additional depth to the piece. If you want the piece to feel like kind of more static and flat, almost like a sticker or a design, then keeping flat colors or simple gradients behind your characters are nice, but a quick and easy trick that you can always do is just throw color. Just throw a shape behind your character and then you're good to go. Okay, but that's enough of that. Let's talk about masks. So you can see here we have a mask called Mocha, and then further up we have a mask called Mika. Isn't that nice? Very, very easy to digest. Now the way that I do these is I'll show you how I actually create a mask. And the way that you should be doing it too, or I will find you and discipline you very harshly. Okay, here's what I want you to never do. And it's the reason why you keep the outsides of your lines very clean. Because it will save you a little bit of time when you start going into mask. Because doing it like this, right? Going in and manual masking everything, you should never, ever do that, okay? If you do stuff like this still, then I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed, okay? So let's take, you want to make me a happy dad and a happy art dad. Where am I going with this? My girlfriend's been giving me so much hard time because she says I'm finding dad jokes more and more funny. She's like, you're turning into a dad. I'm like, yeah, I'm 30 years old. I guess I am turning into that age. I mean, I have 3 children. I do have 3 furry children over there in their cages. No, I mean, they're not mutants. They're bunnies. But anyway, yes, you want to make me a happy father, okay? So don't manual mask. Never, ever do this, okay? Instead, let me show you how to properly do this. Let's go ahead and select that, delete it. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to take your nice, clean line art. You're going to take your nice, clean line art, and you're going to make sure that you have it selected and only that selected. So let's get rid of Mocha, okay? You want to have something like this. Everything is closed off. And you want to take your magical wand and you want to click on the outside of the character, okay? I set my tolerance to about 50. I find that 50 works pretty well if you have nice high contrast lines like this. Go ahead and select that. Oh, we got some little holes here, right? In between where Mika's hair is. And between the legs. There we go. Now we have all of the areas outside of our character selected. However, we want to select the inside of the character. Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to do it like this. Actually, before we invert it, well, actually, we can invert it now. The way that you invert a selection is you hit Shift-Control-I. Okay? Now, nothing will look like it happened, but I rest assured it actually did do something. It inverted your selection, and now you have selected everything on the inside of the character. And just to prove it to you, I'm going to fill Mika with this bright green. Okay? See, isn't that awesome? However, there's a problem here. There's a problem in that if you have a dark background, I know you're going to run into this issue. I'm going to show you how to fix it. See that right there? See that crap? Look at this. Look at this green outline that goes along your entire drawing. No, we're not stopping there. Get that crap out of here. So here's how we're going to fix that. We're going to go back to before we filled the character, when we had that selection, and we're going to go up to our taskbar. We're going to hit select, and we're going to go to modify, and then you're going to go to contract. Now, depending on the resolution of your piece and all that, all that jargon, the amount that you're going to contract it by will differ. However, I find that a good thing to start with, a good amount to start with, is just try 3 pixels. Now watch what happens. Do you see that? How it brought in our selection? See it moving back and forth there? It's bringing our selection in a little bit more, so now it's within our lines. I think we could go for another contraction there. Let's go ahead and do that. Oh, whoops, I'm in the wrong one. Modify, contract. Let's contract by another 2 pixels. That looks like a much safer place to be. Let's go ahead and fill it with that green. And let's go ahead and fill the background again with that dark color. And watch what happens now. Oh, isn't that nice? No more green artifacts around our character. We have a nice clean mask, and you know what the best part of it is? We didn't have to manually do that. We probably saved ourselves a good 20 minutes. However, you will have to manually mask out the rest of the character, but regardless, getting this thing started, it just saves a lot of time, and I highly recommend that everybody does this. In fact, there's a lot of other ways that you can save time as well, because notice how this mask, or this, I like to call this the character mask, or the silhouette mask. This can always come in handy whenever you are, say you're getting ready to do the hair mask, okay, which you will have to do manually. But here's a really cool thing that you can do. Let's say that you just started with pink, and then you got your nice masking brush, which let's hope to heaven that it is a proper masking brush, right? And that means that it's always it's always at 100% opacity, and you don't have to press hard and kill your wrist. Okay, that's the proper masking brush. Okay, but see how we're going outside of our character? Well, here's a cool thing that you can do. Because we've set up this character mask, you can easily just reselect those pixels by holding Control and clicking right on the layer. Now see, now we have those marching ants, and now I can't even paint outside of the silhouette if I tried. Okay, so that's a really nice thing to do. And say that the marching ants, give you the willies, you're afraid of bugs, that's okay. You can hit Control H to hide the ants, and yet your selection still is there. Isn't that awesome? See, I can't paint outside of the hair. And if you ever just forget, or you want to start drawing something over here, you're like, oh, what's going on? It's probably because your ants have become ghosts and you can't see them. To get rid of them, to abolish them, you hit Control D or deselect. Now look, now you can paint wherever you like again. So that's the nice thing about having that silhouette mask, is you can always select it and then allow it to just keep the boundaries on your new masks as you create them. Okay, so with all that out of the way, there's some tips for you there. Let's go ahead and begin building this character up from the ground. Up from the ground. Okay, so we've got Mika's mask. Let's go ahead and where's Mocha's mask? Where is Mocha's mask? There we go. Now let's go ahead and turn those lines back on. My PSDs I try to keep them as concise and organized as possible. Mostly for you guys. But let's go ahead and start building this up. Okay, so the first thing that you'll notice is, well, hey, there's a light layer, and there's a little arrow next to it. And what is this one? Oh, there's another layer with an arrow pointing back. What do these layers do? What are these layers there for? And each of these layers are basically, you start out with a mask. Like I like to separate out all of my different materials. So in this case, Mika's dress will be one layer, the sheer material of her stockings will be a different layer, and then her skin will be a different layer. And the reason why I separate out all of these is because I want to be able to light them and shade them all one by one. Okay? Now, going back to what I was just saying, the arrow pointing back is what is called a clipping mask. See how I can just grab this layer right here called shading, and I can move it around, but see how it doesn't go outside of the bounds of the layer behind it, which is Mika's skin. See, even as I move Mika's skin, the other layer stays there. This is what a clipping mask is. Clipping mask basically says, and here's how you can see what it looks like if you unclip it. You will hold Alt and click between the two layers. See how it changes that icon right there? Click between the two layers and see what happens. Oh, wow. The shading of the legs is now overtaking the rest of the drawing. It's in places where we don't like it to be. It's up in the hair and it's everywhere and it's just causing confusion. So the best thing that you can do is use clipping masks. Clipping masks are awesome. Another reason why I like clipping masks for this reason is because it allows you to light things. So let's go ahead and just pick a soft brush. Let me give you a quick little rundown of how I would light something. Let's go ahead and just erase this entire thing. I'm going to grab this color first though. So what's really cool about doing a clipping mask like this is that you can say, okay, well, I know that the lighting is going to be a fairly frontal light source. It's going to be very, simple kind of photo setup. Let's say, okay, well then let's light Mika's face like this, and let's light her hands like that, and let's light her oh wait, let's erase the legs, and let's light the legs like that, and like that, okay? But see how that's just kind of like, it's all right, and you want to add some more shadows back in. You want to add some more realism back into this. And the way that you do that is just by flipping your pen around, flip your stylus around, use the eraser, and now you can begin to carve out your cast shadows. Isn't that awesome? Because you already figured out what the color of the shadows were. That's why I like to start with dark masks, and then I add the light on top of it. See how now I can kind of bring the shadows back into the face. I can bring the shadows back into the face. I can go to the hands, and I can say, okay, this plane changes. So let's go ahead and have this be all dark. Have this be all dark. Maybe kind of chisel in some shadows right there. Super, super easy lighting, super easy coloring. And then you can also go in there and be like, okay, we want a little blush line kind of happening throughout the face. And that just allows you to very quickly begin to light your character. This is the basis for how I create all of my work. All of my work, okay? So if you guys want similar results, do it like this. Okay, so let's continue on. Before we mess that up, let's continue up. Okay, so we have lips, the lips layer. That's literally just Mika's lips. Really, really simple. I just put a little bit of pink on the top there to show the plane and that she actually has lips. Looks a little bit better for this rendered anime style. Let's go to the skin too. Here's a good example of skin that overlaps itself. If this was on the same layer, it might be hard for me to get in there and like make sure that the lighting is different on the hands versus like the sheer fabric or like the openings in this dress on the chest. So I just made a separate layer called skin 2. Made it much easier. So the hair, okay, this is going to be really easy to see. Okay, so you have the hair, which is our base color, our shadow color. And then on top of that, here we have our clipping mask. See? Boom. Awesome. You can move that around. You can click Alt or hold Alt and click between the two to see, oh my gosh, Mika's head's gone nuclear. What are we going to do? Oh, well, we can zoom out and then zoom back in. But see how this is the clipping mask. This is what it looks like if it's not clipped back. So make sure you clip that stuff back and see how easy that is. Look at how easy it was for me to light this hair. Like here, I'll just show you over again. I'll do it over again in like 2 seconds. I just grabbed that pink. I was like, okay, let's have some light here. Let's have some light there. Have some light there. Okay, now let's do some cut-ins. Let's cut those shadows back into it. So we'll have like a shadow there. We'll have shadow there and there and there. And let's have a cast shadow right there and cast shadow right there. See how simple that is? So easy. Oh yeah, and there was like little hair pieces that I kind of went through and did this type of thing too. So like little details like that, so easy to put into the hair. And then for the shine, oh, here's a really cool trick with the shine. So you can also lock these pixels. See this little checkerboard right here? Click that button, and what it's going to do is it's going to lock the pixels of your lighting. So now let's say that you wanted to put that really trendy light band going through the hair, or the signature anime light band. Look at how easy that is to do. See, I can just pick that color, I can make it brighter, hue shift it a little bit to make it look nice, and then boom, I can do it like that. See how easy that is? But here's the cool thing, because we locked those pixels, see how it only affects the areas of our light. It doesn't, see, if we unlocked it and tried to do that, see how it's going to spill over into everything? See, it's spilling over into the dark parts. It's the shadows. It's spilling over into the shadows, and that is not correct. So don't do that, okay? Set up your light sources, and then within those light sources, lock those pixels, and then you can put on the hairband. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's go ahead and continue. Okay, thank heaven I have enough history states that I can go back and do this. Okay, let's move on to the eyes. Eyes, very easy. Those are just, I mean, that's very simple. One thing that I always forget, or one thing that helps out a lot with eyes, is you want to avoid making them all straight white. Try to avoid making them straight white like this. You want to keep in mind that eyes have a cast shadow. There's a little bit of a cast shadow that happens here. So add in a little bit of shading at the top of your eyes. It'll make them look really nice, okay? Believe me, give it a go. Okay, next up, we got the blades. Awesome, there's the blade, and here's the light. That was basically a complete overpaint, just going from there to there. This is a good chance for me to talk about reference. The reason that this blade ends up looking so nice at the end is because when I really want to go in there and render out my materials, I'm always looking at a piece of reference. I'm looking at a photograph, or if I can, I'll get the actual material in front of me to look at how the light interacts with it at different angles, and that will help you out and save you a ton of time. All right, moving on to, let's go ahead and move on to Mocha. Where's Mocha at? Okay, so let's do the same thing with Mocha. Easy. Okay, so we know now how the structure of our PSD works. So here we have the Mocha mask. Another common thing that I like to do is I'll set up the mask so that it's actually a color that I'll be using. So you can see here in this case, the silhouette mask, or the character mask, is actually this dark, what I'm using for the dark black fabrics. And what that does is it just saves another little bit of time. So that way I'm picking the color that is most prevalent on the character. In this case, the black fabric. It like takes up this entire piece here. And I think that's about it. Maybe it took up like Mocha's hair as well. But I just pick a color and then I say, okay, that is the character. That's the character mask. And so there's our lighting. Let's go ahead and move on to the stocking. Oh, something that's really cool about stockings is to make them look sheer. It's actually a trick with the colors. See how what I'm doing here is I've got this color on the edge, which is a desaturated purple, but then as I move towards the center, you can see here, pay attention to this Richter scale. Look at this hue Richter scale. It's moving towards red, and it's also lightening a bit. And what this does is it creates the illusion of the fabric being stretched, and you can see the skin underneath. The same thing is happening with Mocha's legs here. See how we have this nice desaturated purple? But right here, we're moving towards reds. We're moving towards these dark reds. And because of that hue shift, it's giving your mind it is telling your mind that that material is a sheer stocking. And it's really awesome. Love that stuff. And guess how I figured that out? Reference. You can find all kinds of good reference for this online. So anyway, continuing. Mocha Skin. Let's go ahead and light up Mocha Skin. So similar to Mika, you can see here, same thing. It's just adding those colors on, and you can see right here, look at how I carved that cast shadow back out. Super nice and easy. The mouth. Blush? Wait. Okay, yeah, blush. I'll make this a separate layer just because I like to put a lot of subtlety in the lips. You can also see a little bit on the cheeks as well as on the top of the nose. Tiny little changes in the pigment of your character's skin can really go a long way. And that is also going to be coming into play with the colored lines, which are going to be at the very end. But let's go ahead and continue and finish this up. Let's go ahead and move into Mocha's hair. So the same thing. Look, you can see here, there's a very slight gradient. There's a slight gradient. You can see it here that was added at the top, and then we put the light band in. And then last but not least, all of the white fabrics of Mocha here. Look at how dark I started this. This is supposed to be a white fabric, but look at what color I used. I desaturated, add a little bit of blue in there, and it's actually hovering right around in this area. And then what color did we use for the lightness? Pure white. Well, actually not pure white. I always try to avoid going all the way pure white. Just for personal preference, I always like to think that there's just a little bit of value or a little bit of color in all of my values. It's just a personal thing that I like to do. But if you like it, then try it out for yourself. Always try to be conscious with all the colors that you pick, right? I want you to avoid saying that, oh, it's a white shirt, so therefore I should just paint the entire thing white. Oh, it's a shadow, so therefore I should just paint everything gray. You know, once you do this, see how it just doesn't have as much life to it? But once you start thinking in terms of, oh, okay, well, the reason why I picked blue, you might be asking, why did I pick blue? Is because that background element, do you remember this thing right here? The background element is blue. So it's a cooler color. And what I imagine is that that represents our atmosphere. That represents the world that the characters are sitting in. So because of that, all of these shadows are going to take on a bit of blue. And that will leave you with something like this. See? And once you do that, now all of a sudden, these shadows feel a lot more interesting. And yeah, see how easy that is? See how easy it is to just light stuff? Like, I love just like using the soft brush and like putting a large gradient, like a soft gradient, and then going back in there and like cutting out these cast shadows. I find that this technique works really, really well. Really, really well. So give it a go for yourself and let me know what you think of it. I think it's just a really easy way to light things. It gets you thinking a little bit more like a 3D modeler. You're almost like rendering. You're taking things one step at a time, as opposed to trying to figure out all at once, like, oh, what is the light? Oh, then what is the shadow? Where is that going to be existing? You know, you're just taking it one step at a time. And because they're on separate layers, as we said before, worst case scenario, you can just start all over again. Just grab the entire thing, delete it, and try again. And you don't have to figure out, oh, what color did I use for the shadows? Oh, I diluted it way too much. It's all on one layer. Take things in steps. Separate them out. Okay? Next up. I think we're about ready to move into, let's go ahead and delete these things. We're about ready to move into line coloring, and then we're going to go into overpainting. And then we're going to finish up with the time lapse. We're going to watch it all very quickly, and then we'll end today's show. Okay? So let's go ahead and, so here's our black lines. And here are our colored lines, I think. Are these the colored lines? Yes, they are. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just merge this so that way we can compare and contrast. Okay? So the next thing that I like to do, once I've got my characters all lit, is I will have these black lines. And you'll notice how it makes the characters' faces, like particularly in the facial areas, any places with like skin on it, like look at Mika's nose. See how it just like makes this nasty muddy color? It's like really lame looking. It looks gross. Her face doesn't have any life to it. Same on Mocha. Even though she has darker skin, there's still like this blush line that's supposed to look cute, and it looked cute in the sketch phase, but now like all of these black lines are just causing our characters to have muddy colors on their faces. But if we color our lines, let's go ahead and switch back and forth. See how this adds, it does two things. It softens the lines to make your characters appear a little bit more realistic, but more importantly, it adds life and light back into your composition. See if we switch back and forth, see how Mika's face and hair just light up and they feel like they're soft, they feel like they're tangible. And I love that. I love that nuance in drawings. And that is done by coloring your lines. Now let me show you how to do that. Okay, so what you'll do is you'll get to this point and you'll have your black lines. What you're going to do is, similar to what we learned before, you're going to click this checkerboard button right here, and that's going to lock the pixels. Now what this does when you lock pixels is kind of similar to a clipping mask. You can also create a clipping mask on top of these, but just for the purposes of this, we'll keep it simple. Keep it simple and just like a couple steps. Just click that layer. And just for demonstrations purposes, let's go ahead and just pick a really bright green color. Okay, now watch what happens. When I paint this in, see how now I can control whatever color I want the lines to be? And that is done by just locking those pixels right here and then choosing your color. Now, but how do I make it look soft? How do I know what proper color to choose? Well, here's a hint. If it's on skin, I find that dark reds work really well. Dark reds, in fact, work about 99% of the time. Kind of like, and don't just do dark red like this. Like don't do it like this, right? Don't do that. Have a little bit more nuance. Have a little bit more class. Move it towards purple. Kind of saturate. Don't oversaturate. Another thing, don't oversaturate. Keep it just right around this area. And it can be quite dark. You can keep it quite dark. A little goes a long way in this phase. Okay? And you can kind of just selectively say, okay, I want some more clarity on the eyes. Let's go ahead and darken those down. Oh, but I want the nose to feel softer, or this blush line to feel softer. You can move up a little bit, make it much more red, like this. That might be a little too red. See how it just feels like it's kind of popping off? It's not grounded on the face enough. So that probably means you got to make it a little bit darker, right? And it can be darker in certain areas. See how it just looks nice on, say, the top lip, but maybe the bottom lip, it doesn't look as nice. So let's keep that bright. Needs a little bit more clarity on the nose. There we go. Let's add that in. I found that this works really well specifically on brighter fabrics as well, or brighter colors. The brighter color, the brighter the lines can be, okay? So see how this blue goes in there, and it just softens everything up, and it looks very, very nice. Love the way this looks. Another hint, the colors will look nicer, or the colored lines look better in areas of where the light is hitting. So see how I can paint this bright purple? See how the purple looks good there, but if I start painting these areas down here, it starts to look kind of like ghostly and weird. The basic calculation that goes on in my mind is that the color of the line should just be a darker version of whatever it's touching. So for here, see how the brightest part of the hair is at the top? Well, that cues me in to say, okay, we can go really bright right here. But then over here, see if we stay bright, it looks weird. So here we need to go darker. We need to have our lines be darker. And that's basically how I go about softening my lines, ladies and gentlemen. Softening your lines. Making your stuff look pro. Making it look pro. See, look right here. I'll show you how I do it on Mika's nose. So I'll go like really bright red for these blush lines because I don't want those to be really that prominent. They can be quite knocked back and we'll be fine. A little bit on the lips, a little bit on the nose. I do want some clarity on the nose. So let's go ahead and maybe right about there is a happy medium. But then I think I actually go back in here and I'll end up doing a little bit of overpaints because this will get you to the next spot. This will get you to a good point where you can begin getting ready to add on the final piece of bread, completing the sandwich. So it gets you to a good point, okay? But the final phase where all of the final, what would you call it? You've got the meat and you got the bread, but you need to add all like the lettuce and like the pickles, if you like pickles, and all the condiments to complete the final sandwich. And that is your OPs. Your OP layers are where you're going to add in all your final details and make it look really nice, okay? So anyway, so we talked about going from here to here. Or we should be right about here. You can see just the differences in here between these two color layers that I did here. But yeah, this gets you to the point where you're ready to finally start overpainting. So let's get into that. Let's go and get rid of this. I'll keep these lines dark. That way, for those of you who download this, you'll be able to see the difference. I want you guys to be able to compare and contrast this one to this one. Let's go ahead and label this color lines. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and start moving into OPs. So overpaints. Overpaints are awesome because now you're going above and beyond everything else. And you have usually your brush of choice. I really like this chalk brush. I also have all my brushes available for download. Those are for free in the description. I really like this brush because it just has like subtle texture to it. I find that it just gives that little bit of extra tangibility to my work. It's the best way I can describe it. Versus the hard round brush, it's like I feel like I've seen this everywhere, and it's a dead giveaway that your artwork is, I don't know, it just feels very digital. It feels very vanilla. And don't worry if you're still using the hard round brush. I'm not knocking you. I personally used the hard round brush well into my professional career. But when I first started working at Riot, I was still using the hard round brush. But it wasn't until I discovered that texture brushes can not only save time, but kind of introduce a little bit more of that organic flavor back into your pieces. That was the point where I made the switch. So anyway, that's enough rambling about brushes. Let's talk about OPs. So here you can see I've started with Mika's face. And you can see the differences. What I'm really looking to do here is I'm looking to begin getting rid of artifacts. I like to call these things artifacts. That is, I'll go ahead and highlight these in bright green, just so you can see what I'm talking about. That's like little things in here like this. See all those little sketchy marks and that line and all these like messy sketching pieces. I want to get rid of all of this. This is the price that I pay for not making another layer. Remember when we talked about, it's like I like to keep my line art to this fidelity rather than lowering down the opacity and starting all over again. This is the price that I pay, and it is the price worth paying, in my opinion. The reason why I like to do that is because I feel like sometimes little nuances in the character's expressions can get lost when you do another final line art layer. I'm just really, really picky with my stuff. So I like to slowly like chip away at it. And that's what you're effectively doing here. So just as an example of what I would do to get rid of these artifacts is I would do something like this for my OP. This is about the time when I have my thumb on the Alt key and I'm Alt clicking to grab a color. And I just begin carving away and just cleaning up these areas. Cleaning up all of these areas like this. Okay? And then you just go ahead and do that on the entire piece. Doesn't that sound like a ton of fun? And word of warning, you can get away with it. The further you get away from your character's focal point, aka their face, you can get a little bit more sloppy as you like move down towards like the legs and like outer edges of like the clothes, places where people aren't going to be looking as much. That's kind of my general rule of thumb, is that I try to refine stuff like my main focal points first, and then I'll set like the little bits of clothing and all that stuff on the back burner if I can get to it, and that's great. Just depends on my time frame and how much I really care about the drawing. But in this case, I really did care about it, so I spent a lot of time on it. So let's go ahead and continue with this. OP, what's this one? This one I didn't even label, but oh, wait, what is that? Oh, that's just putting the little stitching on Mika's shorts there. Let's go ahead and zoom out so that we can see what's actually being added here. This is a good example of when I take a look at Mocha's face and then Mika's face. I'm like, Mika's face is like way too oblong. I need to just take the entire thing and stamp it. What I do, well, I stamp it, but the way that you stamp it is by doing this. You'll get to a point where you say, okay, I want to change Mika's face. I'm going to change the entire proportions of that. You'll hit Shift-Control-Alt-E. And what that's going to do, take a look right there, it made a new layer. But this is actually a complete flattened sticker, a flattened version of it. Now what you can do is you can take your lasso tool and say just grab that character's face, hit Control-C to copy it, delete that layer, or actually hit Control-J to keep it in the same spot. All right, Control-J is just duplicate, but because you just selected the head, hey look, now we have the head on a little sticker. And what you can do with that at this point is you can go in there and you can fix it up however you'd like it. You can make Mika look beautiful the way she always deserved to look. Okay? And that's another thing that I do a lot. I'll go in there and I'll make subtle changes to characters' faces, expressions, and that is either with the warping tool or I'll go into liquify. Okay? So that's what I did there. OP next. Oh wow, this is a huge OP done on Mocha. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happened here. So what's happening here is you can see, look at all these artifacts in her hair. Down specifically on her shirt here, there's a ton of artifacts that we cleaned up. And see how everything, it just has to do with making all of your lines and shadows look like deliberate shapes. I think that's the most important thing that I could get across with this. When you're refining, you want to make sure that all of these shapes feel very deliberate. Let me go ahead and make this a darker color. So see how the light makes this shape? And then this shape is like it's just very clean. It's very deliberate. There's not like all these little sketch lines going through it like there was before. You know, this is now clean. This is a clean shape. None of this like artifact crap. See, when I take it away, there's so many more little tiny squiggly lines that are breaking up our deliberate shadows, our deliberate placements. Okay? So let's continue. Continue on with OP3. We're nearly done. Hanging in there, I hope. OP3, we are cleaning up things like the handle. I think I also overpainted the knife here. Yeah. Yeah, the knife needed a lot of help. The knife needed to get cleaned up quite a bit. See all this little all this crap along the edge of the blade right here? See that? I want to make sure that's nice and clean, nice and clean. You can even see that I'll lighten up some of my lines here. Before, it was like a very dark black line going through that. See that? But then here, I lightened it up to a light gray. And what that did was it just made the knife look a lot more realistic. And I also highly recommend reference on this stuff. That's how I figure out my colors. Okay, and then the final OP, where is that at? What's that doing? Some small adjustments to Mocha's eyebrows and her expression. So much of, I've said this before, 90% of your character's expression is going to be conveyed through the eyes. So always take a break. Like, don't get too sucked into it. Don't get like in your head about it. Easier said than done. I always get in my head about my characters' faces and their expressions. Just take a break. Take a break for a day. Take a break for a couple hours. Come back to it. You want to look at it with as fresh of eyes as possible and then ask yourself, is this the exact expression that I wanted? The kind of DreamWorks, like raising one eyebrow thing, I didn't really want, that wasn't the exact expression I was going for. So I lowered it down and I gave Mocha a little bit more of that confident, sexy vibe. Okay, and that is awesome. Finally, let's move into balance, and then we're gonna move into a quick time lapse. The time lapse should last about 5 minutes, I think. Yeah, it's about 5 minutes worth of time lapse. And then we're gonna be done, but we have a couple more things that we need to worry about here. A couple more things that we need to take a look at, and that is balance. What are these balance layers? Oh, wow. What could that possibly mean, Keenan? Well, let's go ahead and open it up and take a look. Well, we have a gradient map here. What is a gradient map? A gradient map is something that allows you to control the colors of the bright parts and the dark parts of your painting. Okay? Put simply, you can see here, you can dissect what exactly is happening here. See how the layer property is set to screen? Well, let's set that to normal and see what happens. Oh, okay, well, there's some color starting to come in here. Interesting, but the opacity is also set to 10%. What does this look like when we set it to 100%? Oh, interesting. Okay, so what it does is it's saying that all of the dark points of the picture are blue. We've now said, okay, all the dark parts of the picture are blue. And this is sort of like an Instagram filter for those of you who use Instagram. This is what Instagram does to your photos. It adds color to them. It unifies your photos. That's why it always looks better on Instagram when you use their filters. This is basically what you're doing. Or one of the many filters that you can create. But this is the one that I always like to do. I like to make my shadows cooler. So see how I can select the color of my shadows? I can even make them bright red if I want, or I can make them green. But in this case, I want my shadows to be blue, right? Or in this case, more of like a purplish. And then our light parts, we want them to be yellow. We want to introduce brightness or warmth into our lights. This just is a very common, normal, easy way to unify your picture and make it look nicer, okay? So that's what that does. It creates a layer like this on top of everything. And then what I like to do is I'll just cycle through these different layer styles right here. That's this layer, that's what this drop down is. And you can easily cycle through them by just clicking once, clicking again, and then using the arrow key to go up and down to kind of cycle through them. And you'll go through a bunch of different ones. There's like color dodge. You're like, oh wow, that makes it look like really glowy and awesome. And you might find one that you like. I chose screen for this one, but see how it's a little bit too much, a little too much Instagram on there? I'm gonna lower that Instagramminess down to about 10%. Lower that Instagramminess down to about 10%. Or you might like 30%, or you might like 75%. This is a great way to just begin exploring and unifying your colors. Give it a go. Give it a go. I think you might just like it. But I do recall we were at 10%. That's what we're going to stay with. And then the next thing I did was I adjusted my curves. The curves, not the curves of the ladies, not the curves of the lovely ladies. We already adjusted those. But we are adjusting the light values in our piece. Now curves, I need to show you how to even make one of these layers. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn these off really quick. The way that you create a gradient map is you want to go to Layer and then New Adjustment Layer, and then you hit Gradient Map, and then you hit OK. And then you click right here on this bar. See how it says, okay, the dark parts are blue, bright parts are pink. That's not what we want. I think that there's a default one right here with this blue and orange. You can see it right there. That's the one that I use like 90% of the time. That's the one I start with, okay? And that's how you create a gradient map, okay? Now, but the next thing that we're doing is we're creating curves. Now you're gonna go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then you go to Curves. And that's gonna create this. It's sort of like a brightness contrast layer, but this one you have a little bit more control over it. So you can create a waypoint here, and then you can click on this point. I wouldn't worry too much about this. This is just something that I want you guys to mess around with. Know that it's not in any shape, way, or form like necessary to create good digital art. It's just really one of those crazy nitpicky things that certain artists do at the very end. And I've just barely started to kind of graze the surface of it after working, professionally for like over 5-6 years. But it's just a nice way to really dial it in, really dial in exactly how you want your levels to look. And you can like really make it crazy. Look, now they're zombies. You can just mess around with it. But it might give you some interesting like color schemes. You're like, oh wow, I would have never thought of that color scheme. And this could possibly be like an idea for a future piece. Like, let's take a look at that. Let's go ahead and flatten that by hitting Shift Control Alt E. Flatten that down, and then let's study those colors. Let's see. Okay, well, we start with the shadows here, but then oh wow, for the light parts, we hue shift all the way up here, and then just kind of take mental notes. Take mental notes about what's happening. This is actually really interesting because I've been looking at Pinterest a lot lately. And I've been noticing there's a lot of art that does this type of thing where the shadows are very desaturated and then the lights like get really saturated. It's like a really interesting style that I've been really digging a lot lately. And I kind of want to try it a little bit more. But hey, curves can get you there. Curves can maybe unlock that piece of the puzzle. So anyway, so that is the balance layers. Put out front and center. Boom. And last but not least, we got the title. And we got the made of metal, and those are simple style or layer styles. You can create a layer style by clicking this blank area of any layer, or in this case, it's the group. And what this does is it's going to pull up this tool here, this handy tool. It'll be things like stroke. You can put a stroke on your text here. Looking up at the title, see, I just put like a light blue stroke, makes it look a little bit more glowy. The color overlay, that's just to make it white. It was just originally black, but you can easily make it any color you want when you type it out. And then the drop shadow. The drop shadow I actually turned into a separate stroke. I turned it into a secondary stroke. And the way that I did that is you can see here. I set it to normal. Normally it's set to multiply, but see how it like grabs information from behind it? I didn't want it to do that. I wanted it to feel like a single opaque second stroke. So I hit normal on it, select your color. The angle I just set to 90 degrees because it doesn't need to go to the side. If you set it to the side and then you do like distance on it, see how it like makes it go diagonally? I didn't want it to do that. So just set it to 90 so that way it's straight on. And then set the distance to like really, really low. A little bit on it actually gives it a bit of a 3D feel. Do you see how that makes it feel like the letters are 3D? Whereas if you do it like this, they're still very flat. So cool little things that you can do with the layer style generator. Okay? And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is going to finish it up. So I hope you had a lot of fun going on that PSD tour with me. Hope that I was able to explain my actual my process with how I went about making this. And last but not least, let's go ahead and jump into the time lapse. Now that you guys know what you should be looking for, I'm hoping that this makes the time lapse a little bit more interesting to watch, or a little bit more educational, more than anything. At this point, I'm probably going to relax just a second because I feel like I've been talking for a mile a minute. But I will call out things specifically as they're happening. So right here, you can see we're starting with the lines. Here, I'm going to slow this down really quick, just so you can see how I go about creating my line art, how it starts. You can see that I'm just going to back up there really quick. See how I sketched in the entirety of Mocha's body to start with? I didn't like draw in her face and then draw in all of the tiny little details and the expression. I wanted to make sure that I got the entire gesture of the body down, make sure it felt balanced and awesome. And then once all that is done, then I go in there and start adding in the detail in the face. Okay? And you can see how my line art actually starts very, very rough. And I actually refine it from this point. You might think that there's a point where I will lower this down and do another layer, but for better or for worse, I don't do that anymore. I just do line sculpting. That's like adding and subtracting until it's basically how I want the lines to look. And the reason why I feel like I can get away with this, as I showed you guys, is because I always think, oh, I can refine that. I can get rid of those artifacts in the overpainting stage. But know that if that's not something interesting to you, if that doesn't sound interesting to you, then make sure that you're willing to pay the price of making a new line layer, making a clean line layer. And my blessings to you, because I do respect that art style, but man, I just don't have the patience for it. And I'm always so afraid that I'm going to lose something. I'm going to lose like a subtlety in the face. So I don't know. Maybe it's a fear that I need to get over myself. Anyway, continuing, we got our line art done. Now you can watch me set in the masks, and you can watch me start laying in each of these masks one by one, again, separating out each of the materials, getting them ready for lighting, starting with dark colors, because we know that starting with dark colors and moving on to light colors is much easier. You can see that photo that I pulled in really quickly. I'm using reference to create, just the design of Mika's top there, or rather it's more of a one piece, but regardless, I'm playing around with the background here. I was looking at other really cool like Japanese art, and I've noticed that a lot of Japanese anime art, specifically with like promotional stuff, tends to err on the side of almost like graphic design. So it's another like area that I need to get better at. Like they have all these awesome logos and their backgrounds are like simple and geometric, but they have like really cool like halftone things going on in there. And arguably, or one thing that I did notice is that in order to pull off that style, you need to have very, very clean line art. Having a very graphic, like clean shape background tends to look really strange when your lines are not immaculate. So it's sort of a trade-off that I had to make, but I was able to sidestep it by creating that custom shape. And then actually, rather than half toning, let me actually pause this really quick and pull up the, oh crap, where is this? There we go. Let's go back to the PSD really quick. So back here, rather than doing half toning, what I did was I just painted in this very, very subtle hand painted texture. And this just adds a little bit of visual noise. I don't know if you can see this. If you're colorblind, you probably can't see that. Let me go ahead and darken that down. But again, it's not meant to be like a crazy amount of high contrast. It's just something there to just visually break up that area. And it's not like a completely rendered out or perfectly rendered halftone. But I do like that stuff. I do like that stuff, and I am jealous that I can't do it necessarily, or I haven't figured out how to do it yet. But I will. It's one of the things that I want to continue exploring. And who knows, we might do another tutorial on it in the future, because I think that stuff is really cool. And I love graphic design. Good graphic design is something that I have high regard for and high respect for. So I think that that is definitely something that we should explore at a later date. So with all that out of the way, I think we're going to be ending the tutorial. We're going to ending this time lapse, or we are going to be ending this time lapse. And I hope you guys had a great time today. Hope you enjoyed following along with me, as I said, on the PSD. If you haven't downloaded it, then please consider going up and downloading not only this PSD, but all the other PSDs from Patreon. And yeah, let me know in the comment section if you enjoyed this style of a show, this PSD tour. Because I find that it's a little bit easier for me to do this stuff, because sometimes I just like to work. I just like to work without feeling like I like to do stuff live for you guys, but I like to just have time to make my own pieces and not have to be distracted or feeling like everything is being filmed. So in that regard, doing these PSD tours is a lot easier for me, especially if I want to create a lot of pieces really quickly. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought about it. And yeah, I hope you got some good value out of it. And I will see you guys soon. I'm going to take you guys out with some awesome music from No Copyright Sounds, as well as the lovely Lane. So you guys take care of yourselves. I'll see you guys soon. Until then, you guys stay awesome. See ya. Oh man, okay. I seriously gotta say this. Like, you guys have been getting so dang good. Seriously, I was on here earlier today looking at this artwork and I was like, holy crap. You guys are getting so good. I'm so proud of your guys' art. Like, the caliber of stuff that you guys are submitting on Instagram now is just like amazing. Amazing. And of course, you know, I like to think that I had a little bit of, give you a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of a push in the right direction, and hopefully be able to make stuff like that. But really, you guys are doing the hard work. You're actually making it happen. And I just want to let you guys know that I'm super proud of you. And I am just humbled to see how much you guys have grown over the years. And I'm excited to see where this road leads for you guys. I'm excited to be a part of it. So thank you guys once again. I'll talk to you soon.